They told us we'd be back before our coffee got cold. Just a quick recon, poke around, log what we saw, and get out. No one mentioned staring into the hollow eye of a god, or how time would bleed and bend like warm glass around us. But that's always how it goes with the G.R.I.C, the Global Research and Intervention Command. That name sounds clean, clinical, harmless. But when you've been in this line of work long enough, you learn to read between the letters. G.R.I.C doesn't intervene in natural disasters or rogue states. No, when the stars start whispering or something crawls out of forgotten stone, that's when they call us the grave dogs. That's not what they called us officially, of course. Our files just said Delta 4 extraction and recovery. Sounds almost like a cleanup crew. But the name stuck after Kabul, after the mines. After we saw something slither through the walls like smoke and scream inside a man's skull until it snapped his spine from the inside. You earn a name like Grave Dogs when you bury more than you save. Only 4 of us left. Me, Ramirez, Nolan, and D. I was the lead. Still am, I guess. Though after Sentinel, the call came late. Briefing said it was a planetary body, Ganymede-sized, but it moved like a shark scenting blood, and it had its own sun. Let that sink in, its own sun. No natural orbit, no predicted trajectory. Just a slow, steady crawl toward our solar system, and a burn around it like it was dragging the idea of warmth behind it. The scientists were thrilled. Geologist named Kavi, archaeologist named Henry. Real quiet type. The kind who stares too long at things no one else notices. They told us it was a test of a reverse-engineered wormhole device, tech pulled from some ancient ruins in Russia. Alien tech. I didn't like that. The tech is older than fire, and here we were cracking it open like apes with a gun. They called the planet UW Sentinel. Unidentified world, Sentinel. The name stuck like a splinter. Supposedly the wormhole device could reach 5 light years out. Long shot, but they wanted to try it. Not because it was safe, because it was convenient. We'd get there, poke around, see if the air was breathable, and report back. Simple. I've learned simple is usually the first lie they feed you before the descent. We arrived and stepped out onto something we couldn't name. The sky was black but lit. You could see a miniature sun dancing lazily around the horizon, hugging the planet like a loyal pet. The ground felt wrong. Gravity was there, but it had moods. Some places pulled harder, some lighter. Our suits adjusted, but our guts never stopped complaining. And the air, it had weight, like it had been used before. Ramirez was the first to say it. Place is a tomb. He wasn't wrong. Not a single sign of life, not even the distant chirp of bugs, just quiet. Eerie, museum-like quiet. Then we saw it. The city. Ruins stretching out in every direction like the broken skeleton of a civilization that tried too hard to touch the divine. We headed toward it. From a distance, we spotted something in the sky. Drones. Not ours. Silent, shifting, hovering like vultures without wings. Nolan watched them through his scope for a while. Said nothing. But I saw his jaw tense, that was enough. We reached the outskirts first. Stone carvings, alien inscriptions, statues worn down to smooth outlines. Henry lit up. Said the depiction showed something like a war or a sacrifice. He couldn't say. Only that the civilization ended fast, and not from within. I should have pulled us out then. Should have. We pressed forward, toward the heart of the city. Streets were carved in metal and bone. We came to an intersection, and that's when we saw it. The creature. It stood still, unmoving, watching, like it had been waiting a long, long time. We didn't approach. Not yet. We circled around, took back alleys and narrow lanes. Eventually, we found a massive spherical structure, easily a kilometer across. It pulsed faintly, alive somehow. We found a way in, that's when the bones started, stacked in corners, crushed into the walls, etched with symbols no one could read. Henry muttered something about language and death. Then we saw the creature again. This time it moved. Henry, poor bastard, thought he could communicate. Took a step forward, raised a hand. I remember the hesitation in his fingers, the way he trembled, the way the creature didn't. Then the scream. I'll never forget that sound. Wet, sharp, and final, we opened fire. Ramirez laid down suppressing fire as we fell back, dragging Henry's shredded remains behind us. But the creature didn't pursue. It vanished like smoke. We kept moving until we found it. The void room. A hallway opened up into a chamber so vast it swallowed light. Night vision flickered. Thermals gave us nothing. We walked. 30 minutes. Nothing changed. Kavi said we'd either gone in circles or the room broke physics. He was right. I pulled out my 12 x scope and looked back. The hallway entrance was still there. Far, far off. Too far. Someone asked if the creature followed us. I didn't answer. Another 10 minutes passed in silence. Boots echoed, breath echoed, fear echoed. Then the doorway, sealed, massive, and it hummed. Not audibly, not like sound. It was inside our helmets, in our skulls. We screamed. One of my team slammed his head against the wall. Another turned his rifle on himself, then silence. We checked the body, no pulse. Gone. I made the call to get out. Fast. That's when we found Henry's body again. Impossible. He was dead. We saw him die. But there he was, like he'd followed us. And time had stopped making sense. You ever feel like time's got fingers? Like it wraps around your spine and pulls, tugging you forward when you're not ready? Freezing you in place when all you want is to move? That's what it felt like. Standing there, staring down at Henry's corpse again, like the planet was playing a joke none of us were in on. The wounds were identical. Suit torn open across the midsection, blood long dried in the seams. But that wasn't what got me. What got me was the eyes. They were open, like he'd never stopped watching us. Dee whispered, "This ain't right." None of this is. She was right. I checked the mission clock. 65 hours left until the link. No way. We'd had 12 left, tops. It had been maybe 2 hours since that last reading. Our clocks were lying, or something was lying to them. Kavi started pacing, muttering something about relativistic drift, localized temporal field inversions, spatial decoupling. I don't know. It sounded like science, it felt like panic. Then he did it. Reached up, undid the latches on his helmet. We all froze. "What the hell are you doing?" I snapped. He looked at me with that wild glint in his eyes. The kind I've only seen in people who've read something they weren't supposed to, or seen something that changed the shape of their god. "If that creature was alive out there," he said, "then it's breathing. That means the air is fine. And if the air's fine, and maybe everything else we've been seeing is a lie." Before I could stop him, he pulled the helmet off, and he breathed, deep, calm, like it was mountain air. Then he said it, real soft, like he was afraid the room might hear him. "Guys, you might want to take off your helmets." We hesitated. Ramirez was the first to follow. Then Nolan. Dee looked at me. I gave the nod. The second my visor came off, I saw it. Light, not a beam or a glow, just presence. The room wasn't dark at all, it was blindingly lit, stretching out in every direction. Infinite. And I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean it kept going. Forever. We stood in a chamber with no end, no corners, no ceiling. Just a sea of smooth black stone lit from nowhere and everywhere. And at the center, far off in the distance, something moved. We never should have seen it, but we did. And then, just like that, the link activated. One moment we were there. The next, we were back. G.R.I.C decon teams swarmed us, rushed us into quarantine, stripped our suits, pumped us full of God knows what. Standard protocol. But they weren't expecting what we brought back. Only 4 of us returned. Ramirez, Nolan, Dee, and me. But they weren't there. Physically? Sure. Suits intact, no injuries. But their eyes didn't blink. Pupils are unreactive. No movement, no breath. Catatonic. Gone. I screamed. Tried to shake Dee awake, slap Ramirez across the face. Nothing. Kavi was gone too. Just gone. No one could explain it. No trace on the logs. No biometric trail. The suits didn't even show his data anymore. Then they checked our feeds, and what the camera saw wasn't what we saw. Inside that infinite chamber, the video wasn't black. It was lit, brighter the closer we got to that thing in the distance. And that thing, I can't explain it. The footage shows it clearly, but your mind refuses to hold on to the image. Every time you try, it slips. Like trying to remember a nightmare you've never had. It was massive. 1 kilometer tall, maybe more. But the light came from it. Not from it being illuminated, but from it emitting light. Except that light never touched it. It was black. Not the kind of black you see in shadows or ink. It was the absence of color itself. A silhouette that devoured the light it gave off. And its shape? Something about it was wrong. Too many limbs or not enough. It kept shifting, like it was being remembered wrong every second. The door that held it? It wasn't solid, not really. Some kind of transparent energy field, inscribed with symbols that pulsed when the creature moved. Henry had tried to touch one of those symbols. That's when it screamed. That's when it killed him. G.R.I.C ran analysis. Said the tech in that door couldn't have been created by anything in our known history. Said the structure violated dimensional geometry. Said the chamber should have collapsed in on itself under its own paradox. But it didn't, because it wasn't made by us. The civilization on UW Sentinel, they trapped that thing, locked it away, built an entire world around it, and now, in 165 years, that world is coming. We don't know what it wants, but we know what it is, and it's not something we can kill. They tried to debrief me, of course. Locked me in a clean white room and asked the same questions 100 different ways. What did you see? What did you hear? What triggered the event? Like there was an event, as if any of it followed rules. I answered the best I could, but every time I spoke, I saw it, just behind my eyes. That thing, pulsing in the infinite light, devouring its own radiance. You don't come back from seeing that. Ramirez, Nolan, and Dee were kept under deep sedation. They called it protective stasis, said their brainwaves were active but irregular, caught in some pattern they couldn't crack, said maybe they'd come out of it. But I saw their faces, they weren't dreaming, they were trapped. And Kavi? It's like he never existed. No logs, no voice recordings. His suit was empty when we came back. Security footage shows him walking through the facility just once and then gone. No exit, no footage of him leaving the teleportation chamber. One tech said maybe he never came back with us. Maybe he stayed behind. I think they're wrong. I think he was taken. After 2 days, G.R.I.C sent me home. Well, not home. A controlled site, somewhere in the Rockies. A steel-walled retreat with one window, as if that made it more humane. I sat in silence. Days passed. Or maybe it was hours. I didn't care. Then I started dreaming. No, not dreaming. Remembering. Things I hadn't seen. Things I couldn't have seen. The planet, UW Sentinel. It wasn't a world, it was a prison. Every structure we walked through, every ruin we passed, every ancient carving, it was part of the cage. Symbols of containment, warning, worship, desperation. That creature, it wasn't a god to them. It was something older, something they found and could not destroy. So they bound it, trapped it beneath their cities, in that impossible void chamber, used their brightest minds to forge a lock that fed off time, light, space, something like a dimensional stasis. But they were dying. Their civilization. They knew it. The depictions showed them pouring into that chamber in droves, not to escape, to feed it, willingly, because something worse was coming, something that would break the seal if the creature grew weak. I woke up in a cold sweat, heart hammering in my chest. For a second, I forgot where I was. My hand reached for a weapon that wasn't there. Then I noticed something on my skin. My forearms, faint symbols, like burns. Same ones from the door. No pain, no memory of how they got there. I told G.R.I.C. They didn't say a word, just wheeled in scanners, tested the walls, tested me, pulled blood, ran neural tests. Their conclusion? Residual data imprinting, possibly psionic, possibly mimetic. Translation: I brought something back with me. I didn't need them to tell me that. I could feel it. A low hum, constant and deep, vibrating behind my ribs, not sound, not even thought, just presence. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the glass, and for half a second my eyes don't look like mine. They look deeper, like they're trying to see out. Then came the footage. They finally decrypted the failsafe cameras on the suits, the ones that only activate during code black incidents. The last moments before extraction showed something none of us remembered, because we weren't supposed to. The door had opened, not all the way, just a crack, and the light that poured out wasn't white, it was colorless. Like all color had been drained from the spectrum. We didn't see the creature move, but we saw its eye, just one. It filled the screen, larger than a mountain, and in it, we saw ourselves, standing there. But we weren't alone. Behind us were others. Not our team, not anyone we knew. Shapes like us, but stretched, twisted, mirroring us. Like we were being watched by versions of ourselves we hadn't become yet, or already had. The feed was cut out after that, just static. And then that hum again. Louder this time. Coming through every speaker, every channel, even through the ones that weren't powered. We tried to shut it off. But you can't shut off something that isn't sound. The hum followed me. It didn't care about walls or signals or time zones, it just was. I'd close my eyes, try to sleep, and it would be there, buzzing just beneath my hearing, like a whisper pressed against bone. Not loud, not even insistent, just constant. And the worst part, I was starting to understand it. It wasn't language in the way we know it, not words or syntax. It was more like memory passed through tone, raw emotion bleeding into shape. Every beat of that hum painted something into my mind's eye. A prison not just built but sacrificed for. An entire civilization is torn down to become a cage. It wasn't just about locking that thing away. It was about never forgetting why it had to be locked. But we forgot. I was the only one left to remember. I kept thinking about the way Henry reached for that creature, how sure he was that there could be communication. But I realize now, it was communicating. Every moment, every stillness, every second it didn't move. It was speaking to us, and we, like fools, mistook the silence for passivity. The G.R.I.C suits started to crack under pressure once the hum reached them. One by one, I watched their command staff get cycled out, replaced, relocated, sanitized. They started asking different questions, less about what we saw, and more about what we felt. Did you experience any emotional shifts? Any recurring dreams? Have you noticed any time loss? Time loss, that one hit me. I had. Short gaps. Moments where I'd blink and realize I'd lost an hour, sometimes more. I'd find myself standing in a hallway with no memory of leaving my room. No alarms, no logs, just void, and always, always that hum. And I wasn't the only one hearing it anymore. Techs, researchers, even some of the guards started to whisper about it in the halls. Started wearing earplugs, but it didn't help. You can't unhear something that bypasses the ears entirely. Then the deaths began. Quiet ones at first. Natural causes. Heart attacks. Aneurysms. All internal, all sudden. They'd pull the bodies out wrapped in white sheets and never talk about it. But I saw the scans. Brainwave patterns spiking to unreadable levels before flatlining. Like something invaded them in their last moments. And the symbols, they weren't fading. They were spreading. At first just my arms, then my chest, my back. No pain, no scarring. But every morning, more of them, like ink seeping from beneath my skin. And I knew, I just knew, they weren't random. They were messages, and I was the page. I tried to warn someone, anyone, but every time I started to speak, the words twisted in my throat like something was coiled around my tongue. I'd start shaking, convulsing, eyes rolling back. Medical staff said it was psychological trauma, stress response, but I knew. I knew the truth. That thing from UW Sentinel, It never wanted to escape, it wanted to be carried, and I was carrying it whether I wanted to or not. I stopped trusting mirrors. Something about the way they returned my stare, too still, too deliberate. It was like the reflection was waiting for me to blink first. You know when you glance at your own face and feel off? Like you're being watched from the other side? That's how it started. But the longer I looked, the worse it got. Not the kind of worse you can explain, just wrong. Like the mirror knew something I didn't. My sleep, what little of it I got, was filled with visions I couldn't control. I wasn't dreaming in the usual way, I was reliving. Walking the infinite chamber again and again, but alone this time. Always alone. No voices, no team. Just footsteps echoing forever in that blinding void. And then I'd see them, those twisted reflections, versions of us. Our armor smeared in black ash, eyes hollow, moving like puppets strung to gravity that wasn't ours. Sometimes I'd wake up before they reached me. Sometimes I wouldn't. The worst nights were the ones where I'd wake up whispering the symbols. My voice, but not my cadence. The syllables didn't belong to me. I recorded one of them once, played it back later. There was a second voice underneath mine, faint but unmistakable. It spoke with me, through me. I destroyed the recorder. It didn't matter. I could still hear it, even after the playback ended. After that, I stopped talking to anyone unless I had to. Didn't want to give it another way out, but it didn't need words. It started showing me things. Not through dreams, visions, full-blown waking flashes. I'd be sitting still trying to hold on to my thoughts, and then, gone. My surroundings would melt into something else entirely. I'd see the city again, the bones in the walls, the tower with the breathing skin. Then I'd be standing outside, watching the world crack like glass under pressure. I saw Earth, but not our Earth. A version scorched by lightless flame, with oceans frozen mid-wave and cities crumbling upwards. I saw Ramirez's body floating in that infinite room, curled fetal, eyes wide open. And Nolan had changed. His armor peeled back like paper, and something else had grown from underneath. Something smooth and tall and wrong. These weren't hallucinations, they were memories, just not mine. I was getting the message, a walking conduit. And that was the moment I realized G.R.I.C didn't send us out there to explore. Not really. They sent us to test the door. They knew something was buried on Sentinel. Maybe not the full scale of it, but enough. Enough to risk the wormhole tech. Enough to risk us. 4 grave dogs and 2 scientists. Expendable, convenient. And if we triggered something, well, better it happened 5 light years away than in orbit. It started showing me things. Not through dreams, visions, full-blown waking flashes. I'd be sitting still trying to hold on to my thoughts, and then, gone. My surroundings would melt into something else entirely. I'd see the city again, the bones in the walls, the tower with the breathing skin. Then I'd be standing outside, watching the world crack like glass under pressure. I saw Earth, but not our Earth. A version scorched by lightless flame, with oceans frozen mid-wave and cities crumbling upwards. I saw Ramirez's body floating in that infinite room, curled fetal, eyes wide open. And Nolan had changed. His armor peeled back like paper, and something else had grown from underneath. Something smooth and tall and wrong. These weren't hallucinations, they were memories, just not mine. I was getting the message, a walking conduit. And that was the moment I realized G.R.I.C didn't send us out there to explore. Not really. They sent us to test the door. They knew something was buried on Sentinel. Maybe not the full scale of it, but enough. Enough to risk the wormhole tech. Enough to risk us. 4 grave dogs and 2 scientists. Expendable, convenient. And if we triggered something, well, better it happened 5 light years away than in orbit. But we didn't just trigger something, we opened something. Even if just for a second. And that was all it needed. I started keeping notes. Not for G.R.I.C, not for the report they were still begging for, but for myself. Little things. Sudden headaches. Times the hum would spike. When I'd black out and find myself standing somewhere else. Always in the same position. Always with my left hand clenched, like it was holding something invisible. One night, I woke up with dried blood under my nails, nothing fresh on me, no wounds, but it was there, underneath in the skin, like I'd clawed something alive. I didn't sleep after that, just stared out the window at nothing, waiting for morning that never really came. I began to suspect I wasn't alone anymore, not in the room, not in my head. Sometimes I'd speak out loud without realizing. Once I caught myself answering questions no one had asked. They were phrases, fragments, spoken in that low, quiet tone. The kind you use when you already know the answer but need to say it anyway. Worse, I could feel it learning, like every second it spent riding in my skin it grew more fluent, more curious. Not just about where I was or who I'd been, but about Earth, about here. Every time I saw the markings on my skin, they'd shifted slightly. Not just more of them, different. They began forming patterns, branching lines that reminded me of neural maps or planetary trajectories, like it was drawing something out of me, using my body to write coordinates in a language no one else could understand. But I wasn't the only one. One of the research aides, a younger guy named Olin, caught me in the hallway late one night. He looked pale, eyes bloodshot, fingers twitching. Pulled me aside and whispered that he'd seen one of my camera feeds. The feed. The final one. The second eye. He said it blinked. The official report showed no such thing. The creature's eye didn't move. I just watched it. But Olin swore up and down that just before the footage cut to static, the eye closed and opened again. He told me it had changed colors, shifted from black to red to violet, and then to something his mind couldn't hold on to. He said he'd started dreaming about it after that, about a spiral staircase carved out of ribs, a heartbeat beneath stone. I didn't ask him how it ended. The next day, he was gone. They said he had a breakdown, shipped him off-site for psych evaluation. I checked the departure logs. No transport left that night. His room was still locked from the inside, and his badge was missing. Same as Kavi. The pattern was becoming clear. This wasn't contagion, it wasn't an infection, it was a selection. Something on Sentinel reached out, and it was choosing. After Olin vanished, I stopped reporting things. It was pointless. Every time I tried to tell the truth about the dreams, the symbols, the reflections, I'd see it in their eyes. The subtle shift, the mental notes, the inevitable recommendation for observation. That was the last thing I needed. I wasn't going to end up like Ramirez or Nolan, drooling into a pillow while my brain was diced up into data points. So I shut up. And I watched. The base had changed. Subtly at first. More guards. Fewer scientists. Checkpoints where there hadn't been any before. The lights dimmer, longer shadows. But it wasn't just the infrastructure. It was the people. There was a tension hanging in the air like static before a storm. Everyone feeling something they couldn't name. And I could see it in their posture. The twitching hands. The darting eyes. They heard it too now. The hum. It was spreading. Whatever I'd brought back, it wasn't confined to me anymore. It had started leaking, whispering, testing walls and thresholds like fingers pushing at the edges of a sealed box. Not loud, never that, but steady. Like an engine deep underground, idling just beneath the fabric of everything. I started charting the disappearances. Olin wasn't the last. Over the next 3 weeks, 6 more personnel went dark. No transfer logs, no comms records. Each one with similar reports beforehand. Headaches, insomnia, confusion, unaccounted time. All marked as routine psychological leave. It was becoming a ritual, like something old was reawakening and needed offerings. Sometimes I'd wake up in my bed covered in sweat, sure I'd been speaking to someone all night. The sheets would be torn, furniture shifted. And always, those symbols on my skin would be different. They weren't messages anymore. They were instructions. And somehow I was beginning to understand them. Not in the way you understand a language, but the way you recognize a face. Intuitively, viscerally. They spoke of construction, of alignment, of preparation. That word kept coming up in my mind over and over. Preparation. For what? I didn't know. Until I found the room. It was buried deep beneath the base, levels no one talked about. I only found it because the symbols started appearing on the walls, faintly, like heat-mapped graffiti only I could see. They pulsed softly when I was near, guiding me like a trail of coals through concrete and steel. It was sealed, of course. Lead-lined, triple-locked, no authorization, but that didn't matter. I already had the key. The marks on my hand lit up as I reached for the door, and it opened. I shouldn't have gone in, but by then, it didn't feel like a choice anymore. My feet moved before I finished thinking. There was no hesitation in my muscles, no resistance from my mind. Like I'd already made the decision long before I found the door. Or maybe the decision was never mine to begin with. The air inside was stale, too still, not like any room in the facility. It was quiet in a way that made your ears ring. Sterile walls, long observation glass on one side, a room built for watching something, except it wasn't clear what. There were monitors still flickering with ghost images, data scrolling in dead languages, shapes shifting across the screens that hurt my head if I stared too long. They moved like they were trying to imitate life but failing in the details, too symmetrical, too smooth. But it was the object in the center that froze me. It was small. That was the first lie. No more than a meter high, pale, inert, floating slightly above a cradle of metal and coils. It pulsed with a dim glow like it was breathing. But I knew it. I remembered it. I'd seen it before, back on Sentinel. It had been carved into walls, etched into bones, built into the heart of the void chamber like a compass pointing nowhere. It was part of the seal, or maybe the core of it. And here it was, on Earth. G.R.I.C had pulled it out, transported it, contained it, or so they thought. The markings on my skin burned when I approached it, not in pain, but awareness. The symbols lit up like a conversation finally reaching its most important word. I felt it pulse in time with my own heartbeat, and at that moment I understood. The creature in the void, it hadn't been imprisoned by those symbols. It had been anchored by them, held in a loop, bound to the physical laws of that planet through language older than light. The chamber was never meant to keep it in place by force. It was held there because reality believed it should be held there. The symbols were a kind of psychological agreement, rules that the universe had been made to follow, but now that anchor was here, separated, uprooted, and the lock no longer matched the door. I stepped back. My breath was shallow, my skin is cold. I knew what was happening now. We hadn't just opened a door. We'd relocated the key, and the entity was no longer bound to Sentinel. It was following the tether. I left the chamber, but part of me didn't. Something of mine stayed behind like a thread caught on a nail, stretched thin and invisible as I moved through the halls of the facility. I couldn't stop thinking about that object, how small it looked, how insignificant it should have been. And yet it felt heavier than the whole planet. That floating relic wasn't just alien, it was foundational. Like a piece of the architecture reality had forgotten it relied on. Every second I spent away from it, the hum changed, sharpened, tuned itself to a different frequency, more precise, more aware. I started hearing patterns, cadences that rose and fell like questions. The hum wasn't just background anymore. It was communication. And whatever was reaching out, it was starting to understand me back. I caught glimpses of myself in surveillance monitors. Not reflections, live feeds. I'd pass by a camera and double back just to make sure I was where I was supposed to be. But sometimes I wasn't. Just for a frame or two. Just long enough to see my head tilt in a way that felt too fluid, or my eyes not quite tracking with my movement. The footage would glitch, then correct itself. The other me was always closer to the object. By then, the base had stopped pretending everything was normal. You could see it in the faces of the staff. Their smiles were brittle, conversations clipped, always ending with a glance over the shoulder. Whole wings of the facility were shut down without explanation. Sections where lights never came back on. And the disappearances. They kept happening. More frequent, more erratic, no more excuses. They'd just be gone. The worst was when I walked past the cryo wing and saw Dee's stasis pod, empty, no breach alarms, no power failure. She was just gone. The others were still there, Nolan and Ramirez, but even they looked wrong now. Their bodies hadn't changed, but the monitors did. Their vitals no longer read as human. Not flatlined, just incomprehensible. G.R.I.C didn't tell me. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I only found out because the door wasn't sealed right. Someone had come through before me in a hurry. I think someone had let her out, and if I was right, it wasn't to save her. It was to test something. Because they knew. Deep down, they'd known ever since we got back that this wasn't about a discovery, this wasn't exploration, this was containment, and we were losing. The facility's air had changed. I could feel it in my lungs, not thicker, not toxic, but aware. Every breath I took felt measured. Not by machines, not by sensors, but by something alive that lived beneath the surface of this place. Something that wasn't here before we brought the artifact back. That's what it was now. An artifact. They stopped calling it the object. That made it sound too neutral, too passive. No, now they spoke of it in whispers and nods, like it was a relic recovered from a grave that should have never been unearthed. Not everyone said it aloud, but I could see it in their eyes. Fear was crawling its way into the hierarchy. The same scientists who championed the mission were now avoiding each other in the halls. The soldiers posted outside the deeper levels were no longer there to protect it. They were there to protect us from it. But it was too late, because the real damage had never been physical. It was psychological, foundational. Something had shifted in the collective awareness of the site. Time didn't behave right anymore. You'd ask someone what day it was and get different answers in the same room. You'd check the clocks and find each one ticked just slightly out of sync. I stopped trusting my own watch after I looked at it and saw negative numbers. That same day, I found a corridor I didn't recognize, just off one of the main research junctions. I'd passed that hallway dozens of times. I knew every turn in this place, and yet here it was, carved clean into the layout like it had always existed. No lights, no nameplate, just that humming pull in my skull, drawing me forward like it knew I'd come eventually. I walked it. The walls were covered in more of the symbols. Some I recognized from my own skin, others were new. But I could read them now, not with understanding, but with memory. Like I'd always known what they meant, and just forgotten how to see them. At the end of the hall there was a door, not like the others in the base. No access panel, no locking mechanism. Just a smooth, circular seal with a faint pulse, like it was waiting. I didn't touch it. I didn't have to. It opened on its own. And behind it, nothing. A void. Not darkness, not emptiness, just absence. Like the concept of space had been deleted. My eyes couldn't focus on it. My mind tried to fold around the shape of it and came up short, like trying to calculate the color of silence. But I felt it. It was watching, not just me. Everything. The base. The world. Like an eye slowly blinking open on the other side of the veil, and it wasn't blind anymore. It had found its anchor, and the countdown had already begun. I didn't tell anyone about the corridor, about the door, about what I saw or didn't see on the other side. I thought maybe I was protecting them, keeping it from spreading further. But deep down, I think I already knew it wasn't about containment anymore. The door hadn't opened because I was special. It had opened because I'd been prepared. Every moment since we set foot on Sentinel, the symbols, the dreams, the hum, every part of it had been conditioning. And now it was done waiting. That night I sat in my quarters and stared at the wall for what felt like hours. No sound, no motion. I just existed. There was a growing sense of displacement, like I was watching myself from a second perspective hovering somewhere above my own shoulder. I could feel my breathing, feel my heartbeat, but they didn't feel like mine. They felt borrowed. Then all at once I realized I couldn't remember the last time I blinked, or if I'd ever stopped staring since I came back from Sentinel. They say people go into shock after trauma, that they lose their sense of time, their grip on self. But this was different. This wasn't a shock, this was an overlay. Something else is settling into the corners of my awareness, pixel by pixel, layer by layer, like I was being overwritten slowly enough not to notice, until now. And that's when the base's alarm started. Not the mechanical kind. Not red lights and klaxons. The real alarms. The kind you feel in your spine before you hear them. The kind that makes the hair on your arms stand up long before a single word is spoken. You know when something is coming. The hum changed again. Not louder, deeper, like it had gained weight, mass. It pressed down into the floor, pulsed through the air vents, soaked into the steel. People began collapsing, just dropping where they stood, not dead, not hurt, just shut off, like the signal had reached critical mass and found the frequency it needed. I ran, not from fear, from instinct. I needed to see them, my team, Ramirez, Nolan. I needed to know if they were still there or if they'd become something else entirely. But I already knew. By the time I reached the cryo wing, the room was empty, pods wide open, vitals monitor silently. The glass cracked, but not from the inside. From both sides. I wanted to scream, I should have. But no sound came. My throat didn't move. My body wouldn't respond. Because I wasn't alone there anymore. There was a presence. Familiar. Watching. It had never left that chamber. Never really been trapped. It had been leaking out for decades, maybe centuries, waiting for someone to find the key, to break the lock, to bring the seed back home. And that someone was me. I used to believe in cause and effect. Touch something hot, you get burned. Say the wrong thing, you lose trust. Step off a ledge, you fall. But now I was standing in the aftermath of decisions that had happened before I was ever born, unraveling a chain of events that didn't seem to follow the rules I'd built my life on. It was like walking a path someone else had carved through time itself, and at the end of that path, there was no ground left to stand on. The team was gone. Ramirez, Nolan, D. I had to accept that even if I couldn't prove it. Their bodies weren't in the pods, and no breach alarms had ever been triggered. The facility couldn't explain it, because the facility had stopped being part of the explanation. Whatever was happening had moved past steel doors and biometric scans. This wasn't a security failure. This was a reality failure. And somehow I was still here. I started noticing more people acting strangely. Scientists pacing in loops that didn't make sense. Same 5 steps over and over until they left trails on the floor. Guards blinking at intervals too precise to be natural. One technician walked into a wall and kept walking. Forehead pressed against the panel like he was waiting for it to give him permission to leave his body. Something was replicating. The hum wasn't just a sound anymore. It was an algorithm. Infectious. Adaptive. A mimetic parasite disguised as resonance. And it had started shaping people from the inside out. They were being prepared, just like I had been. But I wasn't like them. I hadn't collapsed. I hadn't wandered. I hadn't forgotten who I was. Or maybe I had, and I was just the last one smart enough to pretend. The base's network systems began to fail soon after. Not a blackout, not a crash. Just wrong data. Screens showing things that weren't possible. Topography scans of cities that didn't exist. Incoming transmission alerts from dead satellites. One feed showed the surface of Sentinel, but not as it was during our mission. It showed towers we hadn't seen, cities still glowing. Not ruins, alive. And in the distance of the feed, barely visible beneath the orbiting sun, a massive silhouette moving across the horizon. It wasn't trapped anymore. Or maybe it never was. The moment we activated the teleportation array, the moment we stepped onto Sentinel's surface, whatever that place was, it had never needed to move toward us. It had been sent forward, like a message flung into space, waiting to be read. And we read it. And the creature read us. It saw the way we map space, the way we measure time, the things we value, the things we fear. And now it was using all of it, turning familiarity into deception, mirroring reality until we couldn't tell the difference. I wasn't sure if I was still in the facility anymore, or if the facility was still on Earth. I started testing it, if it was even the right word for what was happening. I'd leave breadcrumbs for myself, notes on my skin, objects turned at precise angles, quiet indicators only I would recognize. But sometimes I'd return to find them altered, barely, subtly, a mark slightly smudged. A pen rotated 90 degrees. The number of steps from my bunk to the hallway would change. Distance wasn't behaving like it used to. I didn't trust the walls anymore. I stopped counting footsteps and started counting reflections. Because mirrors, even warped, twisted ones, couldn't lie the same way people could. If something was wrong, something truly fractured, it would show up there first. And I was right. One night, I stared into the glass on my terminal. Too long. Long enough to watch the version of me inside move after I had. Just by a second. Just long enough for my stomach to drop, to realize that maybe what I thought was reflection wasn't mine anymore. It was learning how to be me. It didn't blink the same. It didn't furrow its brow when I did. It was like watching a badly animated simulation catch up to its source. But eventually, it stopped lagging. It matched me perfectly. And that was worse. Because then I had to ask the question, if it became me, then what did that make me? The deeper I went into the facility, the more it unraveled. Levels that weren't on blueprints. Rooms where time didn't flow in a straight line, where the hum didn't just hum, it spoke. Not words, not thoughts, just consensus. Like a crowd somewhere just beyond the veil, whispering until their murmurs shaped your bones. One of the senior researchers was standing in the decontamination airlock when I found her. Motionless, eyes wide, skin etched with the same symbols I carried. I knew her name once, I think. But her identity had become irrelevant. She wasn't her anymore. She was a vessel like me, but her body had stopped adapting. She was overwritten. And the worst part was, she looked peaceful, like she'd finally agreed with whatever was coming. I kept walking. Every hallway deeper into the heart of the complex felt older, like time was folding inward, collapsing into something singular. No more noise. No more questions from the staff. Just silence. The hum had become a lullaby. And that's when I saw it, through a blast door that was never supposed to be open. The observation deck, the core of the facility. And in the middle of it, that artifact. That pale anchor floating in defiance of everything we know about gravity. It pulsed now, not softly, but rhythmically. A heartbeat. And it was matching mine. I wasn't looking at an object. I was looking at a mirror in a language of energy. And it knew I was there. It watched me, but not the way a creature watches prey. No hunger, no movement. Just a kind of eternal awareness, like it had always been watching. Even before I was born. And maybe that was true. Maybe time was just another surface it knew how to reflect from. The pulse of the artifact wasn't random anymore. It was in rhythm with the facility. Lights flickered in sync. Consoles buzzed when it surged. Air vents pushed soft gusts in time with its beat. Even the personnel, what was left of them, moved to it. Those who hadn't disappeared or collapsed were now operating like clock hands. Deliberate, repetitive, mechanical. I realized it too late. We'd become a system. This place wasn't a containment facility anymore. It was a body, a shell. And the artifact at its core was the heart now, beating slow and deep, rewiring every living thing around it to function in service of something. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to leave the observation deck, but I couldn't. Not because of fear, because of recognition. The same way you look at a childhood home after years and remember every stair, every crack in the wall. This place remembered me. And I remembered it, not from Earth, not from this life, but from somewhere else. A memory I wasn't supposed to have, of a world that burned itself into ash trying to bury this thing. I felt my knees weaken, not from exhaustion, but from something deeper, a kind of psychic vertigo. My brain is trying to reconcile two truths that couldn't coexist. That I was both the one who brought this thing back, and the one who had once helped lock it away. I couldn't prove it, but I felt it like a scar beneath the skin of my thoughts. Maybe this wasn't the first time. Maybe this was a loop, a pattern. The entity wasn't chasing Earth. It was chasing its anchor. And we kept dragging it with us across time, across stars, across dimensions, every time believing we were discovering it for the first time. But this time, This time, something was different. This time, the anchor had been removed, and I was still alive. I didn't know what that meant, not yet, but I felt the weight of it in the air around me, the tension in the facility's frame. Like the structure itself was holding its breath, waiting. For me. I used to think waiting was passive, that it meant stillness, inaction. But whatever this thing was, this entity, this intelligence, it had redefined the word. Waiting wasn't inactivity. It was a calculation, calibration. Every second that passed, it wasn't dormant. It was fine-tuning, sharpening its grip on everything it touched like a parasite mapping every nerve of its host before making the first cut. And I think I was the final nerve. I left the observation deck in silence. No alarms, no guards, no resistance. Either they didn't care anymore or they simply didn't see me. Maybe I wasn't there in the same way I used to be. Maybe I'd crossed some unseen threshold the moment I stepped into that chamber. The deeper I moved through the facility, the more it felt like the space was adapting to me. Corridors reconfiguring, lights flickering with subtle rhythm shifts. At first, I thought it was malfunctioning, a base coming apart at the seams. But no, it was too intentional. It was responding to me, like a house listening to its last guest moving from room to room. And then, somewhere in the back of my mind, I realized I was the only guest left. The staff were gone. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just absence. Like the facility had hollowed itself out, room by room. The walls were still there, the light still worked, but the people, deleted. I passed through one of the upper comm centers and saw something that finally broke whatever fragments of normalcy I had left. One of the monitors, the last functioning one, was cycling through footage, but not live footage. Not surveillance, it was me at different points in time. Standing, walking, sometimes just staring at the camera, unmoving for hours. But these weren't from this base. I recognized one of the locations. It was the dig site in the Urals, where they'd found the relic that birthed the wormhole tech. Another showed a ship corridor I'd never been in but knew, the transport module from the Sentinel mission. And another showed a version of me I didn't recognize. Older, gaunt, covered in symbols head to toe. Speaking silently to a group of others that looked exactly like him. It wasn't just tracking me, it was replicating me. Iterations, timelines, possibilities. Each one an echo, each one closer to something pure. That was the word that kept pulsing through my thoughts. Not safe, not correct, pure. Whatever this thing was, it didn't care about morality. It didn't care about survival. It cared about completion. It had been fractured once, divided between worlds, between locks and languages, and now it was reassembling itself using us, using me. Not as a key, but as the final shape. I couldn't tell what disturbed me more, that it was studying me or that it was building me, frame by frame, layer by layer. A model refined not through observation alone, but through some kind of recursive remembering. It wasn't predicting what I'd do. It was remembering what I had already done, in a loop that felt older than time itself. I started to question things I'd once believed were anchored in certainty. My name, my past, my purpose. Every soldier knows what it means to lose faith in the mission, but this was something worse. This was losing faith in the origin. Had I ever left Sentinel? Was the transfer back to Earth real? Or was it just the next hallucination laid over a dying neural pattern? An illusion fed to a vessel that was being hollowed out like a shell. And then I heard it, clearly for the first time. Not a hum, not a whisper, a voice. Not in English, not in any known language. But I understood it, not with words, with recognition. It spoke into me like a tuning fork pressed to the skull, like a voice calling from a deep well in the center of the universe, one that had waited eons for someone to lower the rope. And I had. It said, "You are ready." 3 words. Simple, final, and true. Because I was ready. I didn't flinch. I didn't scream. There was no fear left to weaponize. I'd been stripped of everything: identity, history, context, and what was left was something the entity could finally work with. That was its process, not destruction, refinement. I was being polished down to a singular concept, a fixed point in whatever equation this thing was solving across galaxies and timelines. And now, it has reached the part of the formula where my shape finally fits. My hands trembled, not from panic, but from something else, proximity. I could feel the distance between myself and the entity thinning. Not physically, not spatially, but in meaning. It was no longer far away. It was becoming me. Or I was becoming it. The facility around me felt like it had already been abandoned centuries ago, like I was walking through the memory of a ruin that hadn't happened yet. Every hallway felt ancient and new at the same time. Echoes of a future collapse stitched into the walls like ghost seams. The door to the lower reactor bay slid open before I reached it. No code, no clearance, it recognized me, because now I recognized it. The door hissed open like it had been holding its breath, and the air that poured out wasn't stale or cold. It was quiet. Not silent. Quiet, like a church just before a storm, like the tension that rides the back of your neck when someone's watching you from a place you can't turn to face. The reactor bay was massive. I remembered it being a logistical artery for the facility, filled with turbines and cooling systems. But now it was hollowed out. The machines were still there, sure, but they were dormant, decorative. Like props set up in the ruins of a memory that no longer served its original function. And in the center of it all, suspended like a second sun, was the artifact. It had been moved. Or perhaps it had moved itself. No cranes, no cables, just floating above the platform, pulsing with the same low frequency that had never left me since Sentinel. I didn't question how it had gotten there. I didn't ask who placed it or why the bay was empty. That kind of logic had long since abandoned this place. Instead, I stepped closer. Each footfall felt choreographed, as though I was retracing steps from a dream I hadn't yet had. And with every step, the humming deepened. Not louder, just heavier. It moved through me like current through water, vibrating bones, lungs, teeth. It didn't demand submission. It welcomed me. And then something else started happening. The markings on my skin began to shift, not grow, not expand, but move. Slowly at first, and then... My head felt light. Vision narrowed. I could see it all now. The timeline fractures, the recursive loops, the iterations of myself across layers of reality like pages torn from a book and scattered across centuries. The G.R.I.C didn't build the wormhole tech. They didn't discover anything. They had followed instructions, carved into the ruins in the Urals, left behind by those who tried this before. And we had. The chamber shifted. One moment I was standing in the reactor bay, the next in something larger, older, something my mind could barely grip. It was time. Time for what, I still didn't know. And in that reactor chamber, I remembered everything, even the things I never lived. Memories like cracks splitting open across a frozen lake. I saw myself, a version of me walking through cyclopean cities beneath dead stars. I stood at altars carved from materials that defied the atomic laws I was born understanding. I watched myself kneel in front of beings. These weren't hallucinations. They were memories embedded in the fabric of whatever this thing was. It hadn't chosen me. It had always been me. Across time, across iterations, each cycle ending the same. Someone walks through the door, stares into the artifact, and becomes its final memory. And I felt something forming behind my eyes. I realized what it had been doing to the others. D, Ramirez, Nolan. It hadn't consumed them. It had repurposed them. They weren't missing. They were present now in a way that defied three-dimensional understanding. The room was no longer tethered to space. I don't know how else to describe it. Every step I took toward the artifact felt like I was moving inward, not forward. Inward. Not just into the core of the base, but into the core of myself. I felt the walls peeling away, one layer at a time. Language, memory, time, flesh. None of it was necessary anymore, and I felt the others. Not memories anymore, no echoes. They were present, woven into the act, into the space, into me. Ramirez was resolved. Nolan, precision. D, instinct. Kavi was something else entirely. He had known. Maybe not fully. Maybe not clearly. But when he took off his helmet on Sentinel, it wasn't a curiosity. He'd seen the truth before the rest of us. And Henry was sacrificed. He died reaching out, trying to understand. And in doing so, he'd triggered the next layer of the ritual. Each of us had played a role. Each of us had a place. I stood in a facility that was no longer on Earth. The space folded, bending to a new center. Me. The markings across my body weren't glowing anymore. And now, from somewhere beyond form, I felt it. The entity. I used to think that what we saw on Sentinel was a prison. But I was wrong. It was a womb. And I was the last contraction. I don't remember leaving the reactor bay. I was somewhere else entirely. I was standing in the memory of a world. Not Earth. Not Sentinel. Somewhere older. It was as if the ground had been poured from liquid time, and the sky was a dome of stillness painted in the color of endings. I could feel every civilization that had ever come close to this place. Every attempt to name the unnameable, all of them bleeding into the ground beneath my feet. They had failed. Not because they lacked intelligence or strength or will. They failed because they tried to stop something that was never meant to be stopped. And now I understood the final piece. This entity, this presence, it wasn't some invading force. It was an alien god clawing its way toward our dimension. Because in all its recursion, all its incomprehensible folding across epochs and galaxies, it had never known what it was. Not really. It needed eyes to see itself, minds to reflect it, bodies to give it form. Everything the entity had collected, every mind, every signal, every echo across space and time had become the raw material for this place. A voice whispered, "Remain." That one word was enough to anchor me. I felt my form begin to stretch, like I was being drawn in ink across a sheet of space that extended infinitely in all directions. I could feel my existence elongate, duplicate, echo forward and backward through timelines. It was horrifying, beautiful, pure, and I could feel others now. Not the team, not Ramirez, not Nolan, not D. They were long gone. But what was left of them? There was no horizon in this place, no sky, no edge, no vanishing point. I wasn't alone here. There were others, figures. We'd all come from different paths, hundreds, thousands maybe. Born in different stars, under different names, with different uniforms and different faces. Sent to the edges of unknowable worlds to uncover, interpret, unleash. And each of them, like me, had walked the corridor, had heard the hum, had seen the threshold open. I don't know how long I stood there or how many realities passed through me as that feeling grew. Something far beyond this place, far beyond the veil. I could feel it even now, reaching back, toward the facility, toward Earth. The link wasn't severed when we left. The Earth, the people left behind. They were being prepared. It's strange how quiet the end feels. I always thought it would be loud. Explosions, screams, fire, a final stand, something fitting for all the weight it carried. But no, it came on like a breath held too long, because now I speak in resonance. I am the frequency. The artifact was never meant to return to Earth. The real seed was what it left inside us. The untranslatable symbols that scientists will pore over for decades, until one of them understands just a little too much. And that understanding becomes belief. And that belief becomes a doorway. They'll think they have time. 35 years until Sentinel reaches the Oort cloud, 165 until it arrives. But they don't realize it never needed to arrive. Because the link was never physical, it was cognitive. And the second they opened that wormhole, the second we stepped through, the process began.